Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Marc Scovill. You're joining us for a diversity, equity, and inclusion session. And today we're going to be talking about Morris community and ageism. So we will have ongoing panels about other aspects of diversity in the future here. Our next one is going to be ableism, and that should be coming in the spring of 2022. So look forward to that in the future. Wanted to take a moment and just kind of define what we're talking about when it comes to ageism. It's the discrimination and stereotyping of people based on their age. And although historically it was referring to people of older ages, ageist stereotypes and biases exist for everyone of every age. So our community is intergenerational. So I wanted to talk a little about that. It involves persons of different generations, grandparents, parents, adults, adolescents, and children. Just a side note about all of this is that ageism and ableism are different, but intersectional. Ableism, the topic for the next panel, is defined as the stereotyping or prejudice against people with disabilities or abilities. And Morris dancing is a physical activity requiring some level of physical ability. So the aging process for physical capabilities can lead to prejudice against older dancers. However, we caution to limit the discussion of ableism during this discussion. It will come up, but we're more focused on biases directly related to age. My name is Marc, and I will be moderating our panel today. Our discussion is a topic of Morris communities and ageism. Wanted to take a moment to introduce our panelists, and I am using a very arbitrary order of introduction, simply the first person who appears in the upper corner for me, which will be different than it is for you. So Spider from Brain Trust, if you would take a moment and introduce yourself.
My name is Spider, and I have been Morris dancing for 23 years, and I dance with Brain Trust Morris.
And Kay, if you could give us a brief introduction.
Okay, I'm Kay. You can see my preference is she, her. I am 69 years old, so I'm at the high age end of this discussion. What else? I apprenticed in September 1983 and danced out on my first May Day was 1984. I know it's over 30 years. I don't think it's 40 years, but I haven't done the calculations. Sorry. I've also actually, besides dancing Cotswold with Bells of the North, and I've been with the team since 1983, I've also at times done rapper with a couple of teams, and very rarely longsword. And I also danced with, I think it was Blue Ox, which is a Northwest clog thing, as long as they lasted. So I really like to dance. And I think that's it for me.
And Jonathan, let's hear from you.
Jonathan Whitall. I first started dancing. Actually, it was actually Spider that got me into Morris. I was actually a musician first. I was one of Brain Trust's back in 2011, one of their dragged along to this thing called an ale that I didn't know very much about. And then fell in with, so I guess I'm originally a Brain Trust musician at least. And then I feel like I kind of cut my legs, cut my teeth, cut my legs, dancing with Pullman Morrison Sword, active member, I don't know. And for about 10 years now, have perhaps an interesting or slightly interesting perspective in that when I started Morris dancing, my child was 2 and they are now 13. And so with them growing up in the tradition has been, I think, an interesting learning experience for me as well. And in terms of how I think we've been accepted as parents of a young child now to parents of a teenager.
Oh boy, and that continues on. I myself have a couple of adult children now that grew up in the tradition. So I've been doing Morris for about 20 years myself, and have also danced with a number of teams across the Twin Cities here, and done some seminars for teams in other parts of the country as well. So I kind of had a chance to see a little bit about how people interact in regards to age. And I think that we'll have a good discussion tonight. I kind of wanted to focus it and talk about how to intentionally be an intergenerational community of Morris dancers. We're going to have a lot of different topics that we discuss. Why don't we go ahead and start off by talking about how to make space for people regardless of their age or experience. And actually, if we could go ahead and start with Kay.
You know, I can tell you what happened with Bells of the North is that, let me think. I think when I joined, I was in my 30s, so I wasn't a real young dancer. There were much younger people, and there were a few older people in the group. But we just there was one year that we tried auditioning, and that didn't work. You know, so we gave it up, and anyone who wanted to join us could join us. Any woman, actually, since we're a women's team. So we didn't actually go searching for very often for people of any age in particular, but people of all age, of many different ages, joined. And more recent, I think there was a period when we felt we were all getting older, and if we wanted to have the team last, then we needed younger people. But I'm not sure how that happened. Right now, I mean, I have to give a shout out to the Scots. One of them joined and a whole bunch of others followed, so that's part of it. And actually, Trenny might know more about it than me too, but yeah, that's it.
I think that the influx of Scots into our local Morris community has been an absolute joy myself. So my team has had very similar experiences, I want to say, to the Bells, or my primary team, I should say. So MTM has, of course, been around for a long time, since back in the early 70s, and was very definitely a men of drinking age only team. But over the years have kind of flexed a little bit and included, and their children. So very slowly moving in the direction of the future, if you will. I was kind of curious as to what experiences were in other parts of the country as well. Jonathan, do you have something you can add on this?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, like when I kind of fell in with Pullman, it was a very established team, you know, where I guess it had the appearance of being established. Andy obviously is a well-known figure in the Midwest community and beyond. And so I think I found that a little bit intimidating kind of when I came in, but you know, and Pullman very much was, at the time I joined, a community team where pretty much everybody biked to practice. They only lived several blocks away. You know, I came in from the suburbs. Like I drove 45 minutes to go to practice, right? So that was very much an exception, I think. I just kind of fell in and immediately was like, I felt like I kind of wanted to spectate a little bit, but immediately Andy was like, no, you're on the team. Come on, you know, we're going out to dinner and the team's paying for it or whatever. And it was just this kind of immediate, yeah, we have our thing going, but we are just, you know, we're just so happy you're here. Right. And it felt very intentional. Like, you know, like you've known these people all your lives, even though you just met them. So that was kind of my experience. I think really the team dynamic. I think with Brain Trust, it was a little bit different just because Brain Trust is kind of a national team that, well, Spider, you probably should talk more about this than I can, but.
I'll tell you what, why don't we go ahead and hand it off to Spider if she has something to say about this as well.
Sure. And actually, I wanted to start by talking not about Brain Trust, which is a team that's been together for 11 years now, but the first Morris team that I danced with was Ravenswood in Chicago, which is a team which has now disbanded, and Ravenswood disbanded before Pullman, Morris, and Sword started up in Chicago. And at the time that I joined Ravenswood, there were maybe 6 dancers and 1 musician, or maybe 5 dancers and 1 musician, or something like that. And that's total people on the team. That's not who shows up at practice every week, and that's not who we can get together for a gig or for the ale. And so it was a sort of a real big range of ages. I was not the youngest person on the team at that time. We had a dancer who was in high school, and one of our musicians was at near retirement age, and kind of this big spread of people. And other people who are on this panel have talked about kind of the experience of being on a team that's big enough to have some steam and some momentum to bring it forward. And I think that the dynamic is really different on a smaller team. And that may be more of the experience of some other teams in the Midwest. Maybe they're newer teams, or maybe they're just teams that are well established but have always had a smaller membership. And every single person counts. Great, you're interested, you're in. Where do you come from? What kind of background do you have? Wonderful, you're a part of the crew. Do we have enough people to make a set of 6? No. Can we make it into a jig? Let's try. And so in that sense, I think people of different ages, since every person really kind of counts in giving that team atmosphere, the people of different ages have a sort of a different sense of value attached to them.
Thank you very much.
Mark, can I say one more thing? I do remember a period where a young person, I think 10 or 12 years old, must have seen us at the Ren Fest and wanted to join. And the issue for the bells was there had to be a parent there, and I don't think she did actually ever come in. Recently, of course, we've had Rowan was dancing with us for a while. I'm not sure if she's going to stick, but yeah, that's it.
We'll do everything we can to steal her away from you if she doesn't stick with you guys.
I think she'll agree.
So yeah, I mean, finding ways to expand that dynamic in age is, I think, hugely important. It is interesting to me that the majority of the people here tonight talking as panelists are members of larger teams for the most part. Even Brain Trust is, I think, at this point, a team that I would consider larger than many of the smaller teams. So I would be curious, I think, at some point to maybe chat with some people that have experiences on smaller teams if they see this and kind of want to give their point of view on it. So I'd love to hear from them in the future about that. So I guess a good place to go after this is to how to make communities inclusive and welcoming to young people, old people, and for everybody in between. I think that maybe start with Jonathan on this, as he's our token parent on the block, if you will. So do you have some suggestions about things that you guys have already done or that you're thinking about doing to just kind of help open that age bracket a little bit more?
Well, and I think Pullman's an interesting, I hate to say case study, because I mean, geez, they're my team. I think Pullman when we first started, I think was kind of heading toward was generally an older team. I think most people in Pullman were of older age. And I think when Meg and I came in, there was like one other couple actually with another young child, right? So I think between the two of them, I think we started kind of having, I don't know if we were the linchpin or whatever, but we actually started actually actively recruiting at the University of Chicago Folk Fest. So we started dancing. We started getting a workshop slot on Saturday afternoons, and I think we just started publicizing Saturday afternoons once a year at the Folk Fest, and that started bringing in young people to the point where I think it was really healthy. I think it was really great. I mean, Pullman actually got quite large there for a while. We had I think we had 21 people at an ale one year, which was a lot, right? That's a lot for even Pullman. And but I mean, the influx of youth really did, I think, change the dynamic of the team. And I think there's always a little bit of that. Are we still a community? Are we still Pullman, or are we sort of this larger, Chicago team, right? So I think when that happens, sometimes I think identities evolve, and I think it's very traditional actually for that to happen. I think I don't think things always stay the same. So I think part of, and maybe we're still wrestling with this a little bit, but I think part of it is a little bit of there is I think an implicit age gap there too, right? Because and maybe this is where it dovetails a little bit with intersectionalism with ableism, right? I think the younger people maybe want to do more, get a little more air off the ground, right? And maybe the older people are just like, I can't do that anymore. I think Pullman's been really good about trying to kind of find that middle ground in terms of some people want to work for precision, and other people just kind of want to get through the dance and have a good time. And I think we've been pretty accepting of that. And when we can, particularly for like a performance dance, actually we were just talking about this last week. My spouse Meg was suggesting that it was all about kind of matching, like the precision is in matching your corner, the person you're dancing with, and that isn't necessarily higher or lower. It's just sort of meeting somewhere in the middle that works like by consensus, that really works for both of you. So there can be a precision there that really sort of brings the ages together, which again intersects with the ableism of being able to do certain things at certain ages. So I think some of that is to say we all really like each other. We have differences of opinions. Some of it may be because of our age, but how do we stay together as a team, right? How do we not just argue and bicker about certain things because we like each other, right? Because we're first and foremost a community, and we're a community of diverse ages and interests. And so I think you work with what you have, right? Because you want to make that work, and then your dancing style and what you do is really a reflection of who you are at any given point in time.
I will say that in the Twin Cities, we're cheating a little bit when it comes to that, because we actually have developed personalities for our different teams. So when you find one that doesn't actually fit, your personality, you go off and you find the one that does. And most of us have a few choices in that area, and it really does make it a little bit easier to fit in. Now, my team is well known for our large and boisterous arguments that we then forget over a pint of beer at the pub a little bit later on. And that's part of our personality and who we are, and what defines us is that having those differences and, talking them out enthusiastically, and then moving on to the next thing, solving the next problem in the world. So, Kay, did you have anything to say on this one?
This is the other end of the thing. This is partly because we are a very large community in the Twin Cities, and partly because we have a dancer who was happy teaching children. We actually had a children's team for a few years. And as they've grown older, most of them, the boys all left, I think, but it then evolved into a group called the Gypsies. And then it's evolved even farther, and that was the core of what became Brackleberry. And now there are different people in it, but that's how it started. So that was, but most, and I actually know in St. Louis for 1 year at the Ale, one of the people who was in the Cotswold team there had also been teaching children, and so that is, if you want to get children interested, I think that's a possibility.
It's one of the interesting things about teams that define themselves by age. I think it's Greenwood, Morrison Sword, maybe, in that Tom Crucible does. And I may have the name wrong on that one, but he basically has a large group of youths out on the East Coast that they bring up, I think mostly in rapper, but I think they also do other styles. And then those people tend to find their way into the community in some way once they graduate from those teams that they kind of self-create, if you will. So there seems to be a whole series of them. And in my sword dancing time, I've run into a lot of those teams out there. There's also teams like Maple Morris, which I don't know if you guys know, Justin, 35 and under was one of the rules until it came time for him to age out. And I think he changed the rule at that point. Which kind of brings me to one of the things that, you know, we have all of these panels that we've been talking about, all these different topics. And the majority of these are, we're talking about, you know, a minority, some kind of treatment of people that aren't a major group. So the interesting thing about ageism is, of course, that it's targeting all of us. So every single person across our entire community currently is affected by this in some way, whether you have an awareness of it or not. Other people will oftentimes judge us in various ways. So that kind of thing is so prevalent that everyone will experience it in some way or another. The other thing about this is that not only will other people judge you that way, but you will also judge yourself that way oftentimes. So we tend to develop these ageism tendencies very early on, and it may affect you later in life when you start to go, well, now that I'm 30, I should be doing X, Y, Z, PDQ, whatever it is. Now that I'm 50, you know, this is how I should be. Now that I'm 70, this is how I should be. So one of the things about talking about this is kind of finding ways to maybe step away from that and not do it to ourselves or to the people that we care about in our community. So I guess kind of the flip side of the bringing the young ones in and how we treat that or how we work with that is, you know, there's a lot of us in our Twin Cities area and also the whole Midwest, I think, that are aging. And so the next really big question, I think, is what can we do to kind of make our communities more inclusive to people who are aging out of the capability of dancing. So when you get to that point where you feel that, you know, your knees aren't holding up anymore, your lung capacity isn't there, whatever it is, what can we as a community do to just make it more inclusive to those people? Kay, do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, and I'm still sort of struggling with that. I think there are some things that actually I've been thinking. I have a crib sheet here. Let me get out my crib sheet. I mean, for some of the ideas I came to. Well, first, some of the ideas I came to. If you feel you can't dance, or if you can't dance with the team that you are currently dancing with because they're real high leapers or, you know, all that kind of real strenuous stuff. You could, I mean, I've been thinking that if I ever get to that point, I might want to try to find a group of other people who might have difficulty dancing, to do something like an Atterbury without all of the macho that the Atterbury team dances with, you know, because it can be a very gentle tradition. Maybe we would have to change the name, but so that's one of the things I've been thinking of. I've been thinking about it a lot because I'm not a musician. Yeah, I took piano lessons, but I'm just not a musician. And I'm not a performer. I'm a performer as a dancer, but I'm not a performer as a speaker. So the hobby or even hobbying, you know, I can be shy, believe it or not. So I felt like I couldn't be a hobby, and I'm glad that Sarah Purdy has taken that over because she's great. And I can't be a fool, and Bells of the North is not a team that is comfortable with having a fool because we've tried it. And I don't do music, so what do I do? The only things I could think of originally were just make sure that I show up when they're dancing, to be an audience. I can always be an audience. But some other things that I thought of, let's see, playing music, fooling, betting, hobbing, watching teams, but also, there are things like being the person who watches all the stuff that Morris dancers have to leave around when they're dancing. Because if you're dancing outside in the summer, you're going to have, could be anything, but you're going to have purses or backpacks or things to help you carry stuff. So people can do stuff like that. And actually for the ale, I think that any of the things that are required, even they can help with registration, they can help with, bussing dishes, take some of the efforts off of other people if they wanted to participate in the ale somehow. The issue there would be how many people. I mean, you want the dancers to be able to register. But it would be nice if other people who were just, and often there are people who come along who are not dancing. So those are some of the solutions. The other issue, but the issue is for me not ageism entirely, but people do choose to, as you say, age out. People who have bad knees, bad ankles, do often just choose to quit the team just because they can't really dance to the way they want to. But I'll have more to say probably about that later on.
I'm sure. I actually do see a number of those people show up at the local sea shanties, which is always nice to
That's
have
another one, yeah.
kind of multiple folk communities tied together and figuring things out. I actually wanted to roll back for just a moment because I realized that I missed a big opportunity here, and we bounced onto this subject, but we had been talking about youth. And while I started Morris when I was, maybe 30, I don't know about Jonathan and Kay. I think Spider started as a youth herself and might actually be able to speak to kind of some of her experiences early on. Do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Well, so that's not strictly true. I did not start Morris dancing when I was a youth or before I was legally an adult, because that wasn't available to me. And then for reasons that I think have been discussed earlier on. And then I moved to a different city and joined a team where there were some, like I said, it was a really small team. This was Ravenswood in Chicago. And everybody kind of rode with everybody else. In fact, I had a station wagon, so I was giving people rides. It wasn't the most glamorous, but I was always kind of offering people rides. It's interesting when you said that about me starting dancing as a youth. I think that's one of the things that it's something that has followed me in this community, or I feel like I'm still perceived as a younger generation than other dancers. And it is true that I'm the youngest person on, the youngest panelist on this call, but I'm certainly not the youngest Morris dancer in the community, not by a long shot. And so why am I here on this panel, and why am I representing the young person approach to that? I mean, Jonathan and I are effectively the same age, He's a couple years older than me, but Jonathan started Morris dancing much later. He's a dad. He's a musician. He's tall. He's a guy. So, when people met him and when he entered the Morris community, and this is something he and I have talked about, he was already a fully fledged adult. And I think this really strikes at what some of our preconceived notions are. Marc, you were saying that ageism is something that affects all of us, but we all kind of have these biases, some of which are unconscious or unintentional. What is an older person? That's somebody who has a lot of experience. That's somebody who we should respect, and we should be quiet when they talk. They're gonna lead practice. What is a younger person? Maybe they're unreliable, or they're not gonna. They're full of energy and full of youth, and I think we need both things in the context of Morris dancing, right? We need athleticism and energy and youthfulness and enthusiasm, and also age and wisdom. Oh, there, I said age and wisdom. Do they always go together? I don't know. I just said a bunch of stuff. Maybe other people have thoughts on some of that or want to respond.
No.
Jonathan, you're 2 years older.
I think middle age is something that's kind of hit me professionally over the last couple of years as I work with teams where I realized that most, if not all, I'm by far the oldest person on some of these teams, right? And it kind of comes up to, I think, the generational references, like, oh, you didn't know about so and so, or heard this expression, or did you sing this as a kid? And you're just like, wow, that we have had totally just completely different experiences. So I think middle age is an interesting perspective. I don't think of myself as a middle-aged person. I think of myself as kind of a young person, but it's not really true, right? So some of it's mindset, I think. Some of it is how you perceive, it's how you perceive yourself, but it's also how you, because of that, how you interact with other people, right? So I think if you're more attuned to really listening to, young people younger than you, and maybe just working with them professionally, I think then that carries over to other parts of your life. But I think that's super important. I think it's important to just do lots of listening, right? You can't really, you can't have a good community if you can't empathize with each other. And from all walks of life and wisdom and knowledge and experiences, and parents or not parents or grandparents, coming together as a community, to me, is really the most important thing, and everything else kind of works its way out. I mean, yeah, we may not be the flashiest team out there, but we're pretty darn happy to see each other, right? I mean, we have before the pandemic, we'd always get together for snacks, and we'd bring, it was like the thing, right, that we would do. And other people go, wow, you guys all like each other so much, and we're like, yeah. Is there another way? So yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I think in terms of age, I think a lot of it is, well, it's your own mindset, but yeah, I think it's how other people perceive you, right? I think other people have looked at me and probably thought that I'm older than I am for various reasons. I think I've often kind of felt like I'm not really, I don't know where I am. I'm not really my age, but I'm somewhere either older or younger at the same time. And so some of that is, yeah, you have to know how people perceive you, but then you also have to know how you perceive yourself and balance those two things.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about when we were having this discussion was basically to just say that from my perspective, the Midwest Morris community really does a pretty good job of dealing with ageism, of dealing with intergenerational interactions. I think that there's always room to talk about these things and to find ways to be even better about it. So I think, like I said, everybody's doing a really good job. And sorry to interrupt you there, Spider. What did you have?
Oh, no, I liked what Jonathan said about the team and the community. And I think that in the context of some of the things some of the questions that came up just a few minutes ago, there's the Morris team itself, right? That's the group of people who get together and practice the thing for performance. And there are certain defined roles. You can be a dancer, you can be a different character, you can be a musician, you can take some other supporting role. So that's the team. And then there's also the community. And the community can be bigger, and it can spread over into other types of traditional dance, traditional music. But some of the questions about aging out and still participating as a member of the community, even if you are not participating as a member of a team, right? The team is just a small thing, but the community is a place that's more inclusive. And so when Kay was talking about some of the different ways to do that, or even, having opportunities for people who are members of the community to participate in something like the Midwest Morris Ale without necessarily having, who am I a part of? Well, my team, I'm not a part of this team. I can't pick it from the drop down. Can I still attend? Can I still be a part of this community-oriented event?
Yeah. This is actually, when I organized the Dance Till Dawn, I feel like I shot myself in the foot. I thought that this was a great opportunity to get people together off ale for a gathering. And my hope was that I would be able to invite individuals, not teams, and just get a bunch of people together to dance and to hang out and to eat food and all of these other kind of socializing activities. But because I think I called it Dance Till Dawn, the people that felt like they were able to go all night dancing were the ones that were most interested, as opposed to, I think, everybody feeling welcome to just come and hang out or do whatever. So over the years, I've gone, maybe I should come up with a campaign to rename that event to something else to make it feel more like
dance until bedtime.
Dance until, or get together until 4-ish, however long we last. So I think that even just kind of the way that we name things or the way that we put these events together can end up flavoring the character of them down the road.
Except, Mark, that a lot of people, I was one of the people who would show up, maybe not at 8:30 after the first time, but at 9 or so, when I thought that there would be enough people to maybe dance. That was the main issue. I do English country dancing. I don't do contra dancing. So if you, we were competing with the contra dance. Which a lot of Morris dancers do. And so that made it harder for people to come earlier. But I was there. And I usually leave, especially if Rudd comes with me, I usually leave by midnight. Or
it's just the right time to come and the right time to go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a different welcome versus what you get at certain other activities where it's team organized.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to spend too much time talking about that, of course. We did spend a fair amount of time talking at your home a long time ago about the aging and the issues involved with that and how we might help our local community come up with better solutions to that. And we heard a lot about kind of what you had thought of and different ideas and suggestions you had. I was kind of curious if either Spider or Jonathan had also kind of run into this, hey, some of my people are getting older, how do we help them stick around, and see if they have some input for that. Jonathan?
Yeah, I know that our team has been pretty good about that. There are the things you've mentioned already, Kay, where people are, some of our older members was a hobby for a long time, right? But I do think back to kind of what Spider was saying, where team versus community, I think, is a super important distinction. And I think it's one distinction in that they're both important, right? And that the team is really a subset of the community. And I think about Pullman's May Day every it's not May 1st most of the time. And you know why? Because we all have day jobs. And we like to celebrate with the community, like literally the community of Pullman. So the tradition is to go out the Sunday closest to May 1st, early, because we're not crazy, not 5 a.m. or whatever, but 7 a.m. Sorry, no judgment to anybody that goes out. I've done dawn up dancing. It's really fun. Don't get me wrong. But that's a really good example of, I think, prioritizing the community, because it prioritizes people's needs of the community. It also is not waking up the community at 5 a.m. People are coming out and actually, like, from their houses, coming out to the park to see and experience what we're doing. And it is very, very intentionally about celebrating the community, right? And people come every year. They come to see us. They know sometimes we practice in the park, and it's great, but it's just this gathering of people. And pre-pandemic, we'd all go, like, all of us would go over to Andy's for brunch. Like, that was the thing. It was get up at 7 a.m., dance for 30 minutes, all the community, and then just walk over. Andy would be so generous and open up his house. Just everybody would bring up very Midwestern, bring a potluck dish, right? And just sit around, sing, maybe. We'd sit in the siege. Someone would inevitably sit in the siege perilous, because there's only one seat left. If you've ever been to Andy's house, there's a giant seat that says siege perilous, right? And so that becomes the tradition of the community, right? But that's our tradition, and it works really well for what we do. I sort of joke when and aside, much of Brain Trust was actually here during Pullman May 1 year, and we were barreling down to join the Pullman community, and there was just completely stopped traffic on the Dan Ryan Expressway, and we got out and we danced Queen's Delight on the Dan Ryan Expressway, and it wasn't a tradition that was really we could repeat, but man, I really wish we could, because wow, that was a time and place, let me tell you.
Perfect. Spider, would you like to contribute on this one as well?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sorry.
So we had talked about aging out, and basically, how to find ways to include people in our community that are at an age where they'd still like to be, part of our community or part of our team, but that's not really something that they can physically manage as far as like the dancing goes, and they haven't figured out, that they're a virtuoso at a particular instrument, or whatever roles that we currently have aren't the ones that seem to fit them. Have you kind of seen some ways that people have succeeded in finding ways through that?
I think one of the biggest things that can happen is a really subtle shift in language and in attitude. If people are aging out of the community, they're not old. They are our elders. They have experience. They have been dancing sometimes longer than younger people, but certainly, they have the experience of having lived for a longer time, whether or not they've been dancing. And so to show those people that respect by calling them elders, rather than just saying, oh, these are older people, I think that's a little subtle shift, right? Like, we have something to learn. There are all these dances that I would love to learn if ever I had the time to, sit down in a chair and talk to somebody. And, and especially during the pandemic, we've talked a lot. We'll get these great ideas. Oh, we should talk to the people who were at, the very first Morris dancers in the Midwest, and who were part of the formation of the Midwest Morris Ale. And we should do Zoom interviews with them. And I know there's some motivation to do that, and to capture some of these stories. And so far, no single person, to my knowledge, has actually gotten it together to sit down and do that. But I know the excitement is there to try to learn from some of that history. And yeah, I think that that's a way that we can continue to engage with people who may not be up and leaping around, and even if they're not out doing foolish things at 3 a.m. and creating a story for this weekend, they were doing that 40 years ago or 30 years ago or 10 years ago, and we'd like to hear that story for posterity, or maybe not write it down.
I know that MTM oftentimes talks about putting together a gentler, kinder set of dancers to do a relaxed version of Atterbury or something like Kay was talking about. But we always then look around to see who actually wants to do the work for it. And everybody's like, yeah, I don't really feel like coming up with a gentler, kinder version right now. I want to do the more exciting stuff. And then there's other people that are like, I kind of like to do the gentler, kinder stuff, but have somebody else put that together for me and I'll join in. So finding that balance is always kind of a fun thing to do.
Perhaps this is a pitch for the archival project that I know that Kay is involved with, and I am sort of tech lead or tech support for. But I think that's also a role, right? And I think, Spider, you touched on this too, where people's experiences or stories or whatever get at least collated. I wanted to say coagulated, but I'm like, that's the wrong word. Into some kind of archived or picked out in a way that actually tells a good story, right? And I think so many of the teams have those types of stories, like, oh, we danced on the Dan Ryan on a Monday morning, on a May morning, or just photographs from this or that with a story, right? Because I think so much of it is, yeah, you can look at 30,000 photographs in a shoebox and not know who these people are. But if you're like, oh my gosh, that's a young Marc Scovill, right? Or that's a young Spider, or whatever. And these are people that and then it's like, well, there's a story behind this picture, right? So I think telling those stories, whether it's formal through an archival project with what MWMA is trying to support, or it's just there's always a time and place for that type of thing, I think is actually really important. We should be telling our own histories and our own stories, much like the elders, until they become legend, right? And until Marc, 100 years from now was the mightiest Morris dancer. I guess you're west of the Mississippi, right? Or
depends on the day.
Yeah, okay, fair. And what part of the Mississippi? But, yeah. So I think stories are what, they're such an important part of the community to be able to focus on that. And if you feel like you can't physically dance, there seems to me to be a lot of things that you can contribute to, again, to support that community.
Well, this kind of project is absolutely the kind of thing that one of our elders would certainly have a lot to contribute to, and hopefully working with some of the younger people so that there can be that kind of bridge happening and the passing down of that information on a personal level, in addition to this archive that you guys are working on building.
Actually, yeah, I think that collecting individuals' stories is actually great. I think that we want to have the team story, but we also want to have the oral tradition, or the story that people have, because there are a lot of anecdotes, and everyone, and I'm sure on a Morris team, has some anecdote, how they started, how they ended.
I noticed that Spider put up the legend of rural Britannia. And I guess, we can also put up stories like, the bathroom carry sets and all of the other kind of absurdities and where these come from. Would just be wonderful to have out there for the people that weren't there when it happened to kind of get a more intimate view of it.
Yeah.
Well, but I also want to add, as the young person on this panel, but that we're collecting these stories, and I think it's really important that we do, but collecting those stories and passing them down and sharing them can be a way of creating and continuing a tradition, but it can also be really alienating to new people. Can be, not always, but it can be. And sometimes those new people are younger people. And, I feel like there's been a conversation happening on and on about how do we recruit younger dancers, or how do we recruit other dancers who aren't going to age out so that we keep the dance tradition going. Various teams do various things to recruit young dancers, but to my knowledge, there aren't any teams in the Midwest who are actively using technology like TikTok or Instagram to actively recruit really young dancers. And so I know that this has been kind of a sidearm of that conversation about collecting some of those stories, but what format are they in, and how is that accessible to different people of different generations? Is that a form of ageism, or are the ways in which we are talking about our stories or upholding our traditions, which are so great as they are, that, if a tradition is so great that it's not open to growth and change, then it's also not very open to having new people join and to make that a part of a living tradition. I don't know. Are there any teams in the Midwest that are using TikTok? I would like to meet you.
So actually, I tried to encourage my team at one point to go to First Avenue and do some performance dancing at First Avenue as Morris dancers, and then join in and dance at the club. But the interest seemed fairly limited on the team at that time. But I think anything along those lines would be a great way to recruit. This actually kind of brings up one of the topics that we wanted to talk about, and that was when we talk about recruiting, we do talk about recruiting young dancers. And this, of course, is us demonstrating ageism, oftentimes kind of to our own detriment, if you will. We really do love when pretty much anybody joins that we really like, that we really want to have as a part of our community, whether they're older, younger, middle-aged. I think Jonathan, I had a quote here somewhere, Jonathan, about something you said about this. Do you remember what that was?
Was that talking about if we change someone's life at 65, that should be a success? We should be celebrating the fact that we brought someone into our community, and it doesn't matter, what age they are. So it brings new meaning if it becomes a significant part of their life.
I think there's a song about when I'm 65, right?
When I'm 65, I'm going to collect Social Security. I don't know. Or that's not even true anymore, I guess. No.
You can collect it. You can collect it earlier than whatever your age is.
I'm still figuring all of this out because I'm like middle aged, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I've worked for maybe about half my life now. So
this is where we talk to our elders and see what information they might have to help us forward with that. So, like many of the other conversations we've had about various equity and inclusion issues, there's a couple sides to this coin. MTM is a all-male team. So when we're talking about gender, that's of course one of the things that we were discussing. And sometimes we do these things, and they may be okay. They may be okay for some of us. They may be okay for none of us. And there's kind of a whole spectrum of reactions to all of these things. So when it comes to ageism, when is it okay? When is it appropriate to be ageist?
Okay, well, and for me, I mean, this is what I was really thinking hard about, is that aging, that there are people who are aging and who can still dance, but they're not dancing as well as they used to, for instance. And what is the point at which at which you think something has to be done? And I'm not going to mention names or anything, but this actually happened in Bells of the North, where there was a dancer who did not decide that she couldn't dance anymore, but she was too slow to do some of the dances that we were doing, and difficult. It made it difficult because people were afraid that she'd be injured or they'd be injured and stuff. And in fact, I believe, I wasn't in on the whole thing, I believe that someone did suggest that there were certain dances that she would be welcome to dance in, but I'm not sure. And of course, we have 5 or 6 teams. It's 5 teams, I guess. We have 5 teams in Minnesota, and another team took her on. And, and I feel terrible about it, but at the same time, to me, that is for older people, not younger people, obviously, but for older people who can no longer dance as well as they used to. You can dance as long as you want in any team, I think, as long as you're pretty sure that you're not going to, cause issues.
Can I flip the lid on you for a moment on that, Kay?
Uh-huh.
You said it's not true for younger dancers, but
well, it may not be true for a number of younger dancers.
But I would say that I think the Bells is probably very cautious about letting very young dancers in because of safety concerns as well. So because of how that would affect the other dancers. So I think that on both ends of that spectrum, that same issue does show up in its own way.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember or you know about bona fide occupational BFOQ qualification. That's a legal term, actually, that allows men to act as men in a theatrical situation, or allows a company to say that you have to be able to lift 50 pounds, and therefore, it used to mean that women wouldn't be allowed to work in some of those heavy lifting kinds of jobs, but now because of BFOQ, if they can lift, they should be able to work. They can't be pushed out of it. Yeah.
Spider?
Oh no, I wanted to respond to Mark's question about when is it okay to be ageist or to have that kind of age discrimination. And I was sitting here kind of musing about it. I think ultimately it comes back to the thing I was saying earlier about the team versus the community, right? The team is an artistic pursuit. It is a performance group, and there's a certain aesthetic that you're going for, and a certain aesthetic that a team is trying for. And in that sense, in some ways, a team can function as a private club. And the team is separate, the team can potentially function as separate from the community, but in order to build a community that is perpetuating, that is self-perpetuating, and that is inclusive and welcomes people, there needs to be space for people of different ages and different abilities. For example, if you had a kids team, I think it's an appropriate thing to say we have a graduation age for the children who are dancing on this team. Once you get to be old enough, you get to graduate to dance on a different team, but you're no longer dancing with other kids, especially with younger kids, because they learn dance and they learn skills like that differently. But yeah, that difference between a single functional unit or even, just a few dancers for one specific performance versus versus being inclusive in the whole community. I think that there is a time and a place, as Kay said, for for safety concerns or for things where that might come into play.
I see Jonathan warming up here to say something as well, it looks like.
Well, I mean, I was trying to figure out how to how to sneak in this notion that, like, as people in the Morris community, that we, and with the child in school, that we have actually done our best, sometimes at the request of the child, we've had a longsword team for 4 or 5 years now that performs at the Heritage Fest every year at their school, right? So that's interesting, but it is a, trying to think if that's really community, and I realize I'm kind of taking this in a slightly different direction. But I mean, all the kids there that really in the same grade, they know each other. So to a certain extent, it is very much a performance of that group. But again, it's celebrated even with that performance. It's celebrated with their classmates from all over the school. Yeah. So to a certain extent, it feels very similar to me for what Pullman does for their community, even though even though they're in, 4th, 5th, or whatever grade, doing whatever it is they can physically do or not, right? I mean, even if they can't make the star at the end, like, my gosh, they're really trying, right?
Well, and some of it also is the stylistic portion of it, where it's, some teams like to have people who can leap high, or what are some of the other possibilities?
I do know a women's team that had a requirement to jump onto a 3-foot box to be something that they had to do each year to continue to be on the team or something. It was like, okay, that's, jump onto here. That's the requirement.
Yeah, wow. So style it might be a reason that they wouldn't want someone on the team, and that I'm more laid back about that, so I wouldn't care, but that's me personally. It's not necessarily all of my team. There have been times when bells we would fight about, do you have to, which is more important, being good or having fun?
And the point of all of these conversations that we're having here, I think, is to talk about this and to talk about it openly, to encourage other people to have similar conversations, and that there isn't one answer to any of these questions. There's a lot of spectrum that happens in pretty much any one of these topics that we've been covering. So it's not, you have to do it this way. These are some things to think about and to talk about amongst yourself and to find the ways that work for you. I will say that some of the communities are a single team, and those have perhaps more limiting factors imposed on them by that. Now, I exist in a place where there's all of these options available, but not everybody does, and there probably is a greater need for those teams to have some level of flexibility, whatever that might be, for them to thrive in their environment, if you will. So anybody have any finishing sign-off presentation that they want to do? Final notes? Okay, well, let's just say we really appreciate all of the input that everybody's had. We'd like to open it up to our limited studio audience for some questions, and we have a little bit of time to do that. So I haven't been following this yet, but I'll take a quick look and see if we have some stuff.
I'm going to jump in. Hi, I'm Valerie. I have a question for Kay and, well, for our panelists. Kay and Spider talked a little bit about different roles on Morris teams and communities, and Spider talked a little bit about social media presence. And so I'm curious, I have a couple questions surrounding this, but have your teams created opportunities for youth leadership or for elder leadership in particular to help feel people involved and part of the community? And have some of those leadership or roles on your team included like a social media master? I don't have a better word.
Good enough. Anybody?
Well, I think that in Bell's, it's not so much your age, or we don't have we pick our officers, let me call them, or the people who have these special jobs. We pick them mostly when because they volunteer. That's part of it. And sometimes if more than one person wants to do something, then we might have a little vote. But I can say that it's as far as I know, it's not because of anything to do with age in that particular thing. In that case, I will admit that I pushed to get onto the Midwest Morrisdale board because I figured I wasn't going to be dancing much longer, and I don't know how long I'll dance for. I'm going to try to continue as long as I can. But at some time I will give it up. But I actually asked to do that partly because of my age, not necessarily something that anybody else on my team cared about.
So my team has had a very ritualized format for putting people into leadership roles. And actually, in my time on the team, I have not seen very many of the younger people encouraged to do that right out of the bat. Although I think it's almost expected that if you're on the team, you will serve in a leadership role, whether it's sooner or later. I think I know maybe 2 or 3 old MTMers that have not been Squire or Rag or Bag or Equestrian. We do have a couple. Our team has, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 different roles. The person in charge of our social media is also in charge of our website. And to show our little ageism factor here, we're so old we only use Facebook and a website. Is that an ageist comment? I hope so.
Bell's just has a page at this point, and we've talked about having a website, but it's never been implemented.
Yeah, but I think almost any team has a lot of opportunities to come up with new ways to interact with the communities around them and to encourage people to do things. And it's almost always a matter of finding somebody with the time and energy and some of the skill set to make these things happen. There are some people in our community at large that have spent a lot of time and effort to drag us into a modern age. And many of them are actually involved in this panel today. So you guys are appreciated quite a bit. The more we can spread this around, the better, because I know that it's a huge amount of work. So anybody that has spare time, no matter how old, young, skilled or unskilled you are, getting involved is pretty easy. You probably can see some faces that you can talk to about helping out in these kinds of things and finding ways to grow all of our involvement.
I think there's other ways to grow involvement too that aren't necessarily, I'll say, traditional officer related, because I think sometimes when you come to somebody again, hey, would you be the square or the 4 or whatever? I think there are ways to encourage participation that's not just dancing. I can think of we actually have had several really competent dance composers on our team, and they're also young on the younger side. And they may have been advised from, when they were dancing as youth or whatever, or they just have that kind of knack for it, right? And they'll be like, hey, I just thought up this, I wanted to work this out, and what can we just, take, I don't know, 15 minutes after practice and come up with the dance? Or maybe they already came up with a dance in their head and they just want to try it out. So, I mean, that's a way to encourage participation, is that, like, sometimes people just have ideas, right? And the idea might be a dance. It might be just, hey, let's meet up for ice cream afterwards or whatever, right? And I think being taken seriously and being heard and really kind of putting the team through the paces of expressing that is really key to continuing involvement. And again, coming back to, serving the community and tying and kind of tying the knot, if you will, and making the community tighter.
Finding ways to get them to bring their friends along too.
Sure, yeah.
So there was some other questions, and I'll address the shortest question first. It's actually equestrian, and Larry Klee is the equestrian. He is the care person for Ursula Birdhood, who is the unicorn hobby for MTM.
No, I'm sorry, that question was from me, and my question was specifically about the term equestrian.
Yeah.
We could probably skip over the rest of that and discuss it later. Thank you.
No problem. So one of the things that Vanessa brought up earlier is a team willing to make changes to their stylings or standards as dancers age and or acquire injuries? I'll say et cetera at this point. And I think that one of the main reasons she probably brings this up is because I know that their team has actually done a number of things over the years to their entire style, which is like a lot of teams will do a tag backwards, and Upton on the Lakes does a walking tag backwards, which is much gentler on the knees. And also I know that they have something they call safety sticks. So some of the people, if they have a shoulder injury or something like that, might use a basically soft stick. It's either cardboard or foam or something like that. So while it looks like they're making, the clacky noises, the other people make the clacky noises, and they just have this gentle touch to kind of help, keep those people that have that kind of issue more comfortable to be able to be out there and be dancing and be able to enjoy that activity. So are other teams doing things like this? Yeah, there we go.
I think, on Brain Trust, every time we take on a new tradition, we learn it together as a team. And one of the things that we do is we figure out how our team is going to dance it. And that's us, this group of dancers, this group of friends, and we make our own community. But so this is this tradition and it's got these moves, and how does that work best for us? And some of that is based on, I don't think I'm the shortest person on the team. I'm definitely not the tallest person on the team, but we've got a range of sizes. We don't, actually on Brain Trust, we're all one of two ages and we all have the same birthday. So that, that evens right out, but we do have a lot of variability. And so adapting not just a dance, but a whole tradition to be the way that we dance that tradition, and that's our team's version. It's not necessarily based on age, but I think that's something that can be applied to any team, and team styling as that team moves through time with the rest of us at the rate of 1 year per year, right? All of the dancers get older at the same rate, and some leave and some new dancers come. And so that team's group style can evolve over time.
That is really interesting, this notion that I think Brain Trust doesn't have that burden of, but the team has always danced it this way. Why are you doing it differently? Because the team has, in fact, never done it before. And so it comes down to, I think, really being introspective about, how does this feel for me? How does this feel for us? And coming to a consensus about, and generally, are modifying little things, right? But yeah, I think there's definitely a team aesthetic with Brain Trust where it's like, there are certain things that are very important, and then sculpting that tradition in real time is actually pretty cool, actually,
So I think,
and quite different from Pullman, where there is a little bit more of that, that I was taught this way from 30 years ago when I did my first dance at UC, and Andy brings that, and that's great, and that's cool, and I think it works for Pullman that way too. It's just a very different thing.
Kay and I both have kind of opposite perspectives on something, and that's bringing an old tradition back. And my experience on MGM was they brought Elmington in. And here was this new tradition that we had never danced before, and I got to learn it with all these other people. What I wasn't really realizing was that there was a fairly large group of these people that I was dancing with that had danced it, 20 years earlier, and there was a certain way that things were done, And of course, we did it the way we did it now and learned it now. And it was a vibrant, and interesting, and new tradition, right? So that was kind of cool. Kay, what was the one that you had? That
well, what I talked about when we were talking, about what we were going to say was Sherburne. We had Sherburne, we dropped it, but then Shannon decided to teach it when we were not in our usual teaching system. I mean, it was in the fall, I think, where we usually take a break. And anybody who wanted to come could come and learn Sherburne. But we had a mix of people who had already danced Sherburne and others who hadn't. And so we were doing this is how we used to do it thing. And that's when I finally realized, wait a second, I have to loosen up. Especially since I couldn't, the way I remembered it was actually a little bit different the way some of the other people remembered it anyway. So that's pretty much similar thing. But I think that we ended up, we do have, I think, one or two dances in the rep, maybe 3 that are Sherburne, and we do it the way we now do it.
Perfect. Vanessa, did you have a question for us?
I did. I wanted to follow up, Marc, on the comment that I'd read out, and thank you for noting some of the adaptations that one of my teams, Upton on the Lakes, has come up with. It was when the team was created, it was a low impact style from the get-go. But I was thinking a little bit about Spider's comments about the team and the community. And in the Twin Cities, we're fortunate that there are multiple teams, and Upton, since it's been a lower impact style that's more friendly to people who have injuries or whether they're temporary or permanent, I think has been wrestling with some of these questions more. But the rest of the question in the chat was, if in a team one person starts having issues, whether it's from age or injury, and the rest of the team is still fairly spry, do you decide to hold that performance standard and ask that member to transition to another role, and you're not as flexible on what you're doing with the dancing? Or some teams, a lot of people joined at the same time, maybe that core membership has been pretty stable over time, and as everyone is aging, those issues are hitting the entire team, which forces them to bring in new membership or to make those adaptations. In the Twin Cities, there's multiple teams. You can move to a different one, but in a community where there's only one team, and if it's small membership, if you lose one person, you can't do a 6-person dance. Maybe you can't do a 4-person dance. And so just I'm wondering how some of those issues, the number of teams, the number of dancers, whether an issue is hitting everyone at the same time, or if the person who has a concern is an outlier, where just kind of how you wrestle with that.
So I know MGM, we generally are older dancers. We take them out and shoot them. Okay, not really. It's an ongoing.
Being recorded.
Oh, this is real. Don't tell anybody our secrets. We have a lot of self-selecting that happens on our team. most of us have probably seen MTM do Longborough, and that's our. We're trying to be impressive and really show our stuff there, and it does get difficult to do Longborough the older you get. And what generally happens is that at some point, one of the MTM members will say, "Yeah, okay, I'm not going to do Longborough anymore." And I think some people feel like that's the beginning of the end, and it really shouldn't be. And I don't think that we as a team have come up with a solution to this other than maybe double checking our numbers to see if we have enough people for one of our, higher energy dances when we're, out there performing. We perform at Renaissance Fair 7 weekends and a lot of other performances throughout the year. With COVID, it's actually kind of shown us what some of the smaller teams go through out there. Having a lot less people show up and be able to do a gig really does kind of put a lot of pressure on that, and it does change what your end product looks like. Whether that's simply dropping those high energy dances and doing something else instead, which is what MTM tends to do. We've actually gotten to the point where we'll throw in a song or something like that instead of a dance or instead of a singing dance. If we have very low numbers and low energy and it's 100 and whatever out, we'll do what we can to still make it a good performance, but not kill ourselves or injure ourselves really in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Mark. I mean, Pullman is blessed with lots of musicians. I think we've called ourselves the Pullman Philharmonic occasionally, where it's got six of us up at the front. And particularly if it's a really hot day, we're like, and now for a musical interlude, and we'll just pick a tune and we'll just play the hell out of it, right? And it's fun and it gives everybody a break. But that said, we also we draw from a number of different traditions, and we're not picky at Pullman. But part of it is that I think different traditions in particular cater to different abilities. And so part of it is, well, if you know that these 8 or 10 people are going to show up to a gig, what can I make sure, how can we plan a program that's going to make sure that everybody who wants to dance can dance, right? Some traditions are just we don't have big corner crossings in certain dances, and some traditions are just more lower to the ground, and some people will prefer that. We actually have a dancer who's recovering from an injury, and she loves Simon's Fancy. So she comes to practice. So we always make sure we do Simon's Fancy, right? And that's within her means to do that because she can get through that. But I mean, could she get through Dearest Dickie? Probably not, right? But she doesn't. So part of it is just making sure that you can have a program that works for you, but works for your dancers as well.
Anyone else?
I guess to address Vanessa's question about how we adapt on Brain Trust, we're certainly not. We function as a small team, even though our membership may be large at times. We function as a small team with that idea that every person counts, and I think that that's partly because we only get together a couple times a year. And so we have a little bit of a different dynamic than this sort of more porous or larger group of people who see each other every week on a designated night of the week. And maybe you'll miss here, or you miss 1 out of every 4 practices. And so when we do develop a tradition or develop dances, we're very intentional about setting up the way that we dance that tradition, and also figuring out the dances for that group of dancers, for whoever we are right now. And in some ways, because we get together so infrequently, every time we practice, we have an intensive practice weekend, and it's a capsule. And for that capsule, we function, for that weekend or for the ale or whatever, we function exactly for where we're at that time. Because we need everybody in order to be able to do things. We've got that, we don't have enough numbers for everybody to be able to sit out, or occasionally we do, and then we don't really know what to do with that. And in that way, yeah, everybody who's on the team feels, I hope everybody feels like they belong, because we want to create this this situation that is the best for what we have right then and right there. I haven't gotten together in person with Brain Trust since before the pandemic. So when we do get together in person after, it's going to be totally different. We might have to totally start over. And, but you know, we're all each going to have whatever we bring to the table, and maybe some people won't come back, and, but, you know, maybe our membership will have changed a little bit, but what we do is going to be created for that group of people in that time. This is sort of, I guess I didn't expect to be advocating for living in the moment, but I think that's part of the joy of Morris dancing, right? We want to feel that connection with the people where we are right then, right now.
So for many years in the Twin Cities, we've joked about a home for old Morris dancers, a place to go and live together in our senior years and hang out. And I've actually talked kind of seriously about this project with a number of people over the years. And, you know, more and more when I hear things like this, I think I want to change that to a home for Morris dancers and more intergenerational. I think that it's always kind of been a thought that if we did actually ever set up this kind of thing, that it would be for everybody in our community, and hopefully an expanding thing to grow our community as well. So I think we're going to conclude with this. And I guess our big message is this is another thing to talk about. And we certainly hope that you guys are continuing this conversation, and by all means, bring it back to us, because we would definitely love to hear more about this from everybody else. And we're really looking forward to talking about ableism come spring. Thank you all.